So in today's lecture, I will try and discuss the first part of politics and the English language. Politics and the English language begins with a statement. The statement is very simple. It says that our civilization is decadent and uh, and our language must inevitably share in the general collapse. So, uh, taking this statement as our cue, we can say that there is a conjunction of language and the society, which forms the subject of this essay. Now, in the introduction to this essay, before coming to his concerns with the English language, before coming to the problems identified by the writer related to the English language, he makes some very significant remarks in the introductory section of Politics and the English language. The remarks are related with the statement I have already read. Our civilization is decadent. And the decadence of the civilization is having a bearing on the language. Uh, because of the simple fact that society and language are integral to one another. They are very closely related. The socio-political realities of any society and the cultural properties and characteristics of any society find the clearest manifestation in its language. The kind of people we are can be seen from the language we use. So it is in these terms that the writer traces a relationship between the society and language. And it is very significant that before coming to the question of language, the writer says that there is a problem with the society. I will read a second statement from the essay where he says it is clear that the decline of a language must ultimately have political and economic causes. So obviously uh, we have to concede that the language that the essay deals with the problems of the English language during the time of George Orwell. But we must give equal emphasis to the fact that according to the writer, any problems in language, decline in the quality of language, deterioration, debasement of language is not something which can be understood, which can be construed in itself in an isolated way. It must have a relationship with the society. So going back to the inaugural statement where the writer said that our civilization is decadent, my first purpose is to decode this statement. I can decode it by making 2-3 assertions. One is that the experience of modernity, which the writer has also experienced and with which he deals in most of his writings. The name of your paper also is Literature and Modernity. So the larger assumptions of any writer are connected with the experience of modernity. So if we take that experience and keep it in the background, we can say that the experience of modernity has not been an unmixed blessing. It has had its share of positives, negatives. On the positive side, the experience of modernity led to the economic, social progress of the world. Men progressed, human beings and human societies got transformed and became modern and took recourse to greater and greater use of science, technology in their daily lives. So there is certainly scientific advancement, technological advancement, social advancement, democratic advancement, we have dealt with all these issues in my lectures on modernity and modernism. But what is the reason then that the writer says that the society is decadent? There is some decadence in the society. There are some problems which are present in the society. We can say that modernity also led to uh, to uh, a period in the history when there is a very conspicuous rise of undemocratic tendencies in the political realm or political domain of the society. This was most clearly manifested in the rise of fascist, totalitarian, unjust, and oppressive regimes. Thereafter, we can say that there is evidence of the rise of materialism. So, human values, humanist values are replaced by materialistic life. A mad pursuit of material goods, material means, and material comforts leads to a change in the mindset of the people. Their mindsets are diverted from what we can understand as more humane ways of living, more humanist forms of social existence. So, this is the second level at which we can say that there is decadence in the society. Then, I have already said there is evidence of excessive materialism, oppressive regimes, and lastly, we can say that there is a crisis of human values and liberalism. Now, coming to the next point, which the writer makes with equal emphasis in the introduction itself, he says that the, the, the most clear evidence of the problems of any society are to be found in its language. So, it has already been stated in the beginning of the essay that uh, the civilization, the problems of civilization are the problems of the world, the problems of the society are finding a manifestation in the problems of the language. Because there is decline in human values, because the world is becoming more and more materialistic, and because the world has under experienced, there were two wars which the world went through. So because of this, there is a crisis in the world. There is a crisis of humanity. There is a crisis of human values. There is a crisis of liberalism. There is a crisis of things which make life beautiful. Language is also something which makes life livable, which makes life beautiful. It is the most profound expression of the of the various uh, attributes connected with human existence, human life. So we can say that language in itself is a very, very significant and important phenomena, and it is a faculty which uh, is responsible for making a human being out of a man. So, therefore, if there is a decline in language, if there is a deterioration in language, it is a very serious issue. Because, uh, just to give you a hint, if your language is not good, if your language is not characterized by freedom, by clarity, by uh, by by independence, we can say that it is a symptom of an enslaved mind, because language is both related with the composition of the society and also related with the composition of your mind, the state of your mind. Therefore, it is a very serious issue. And he states it very clearly right in the beginning the English language is in a bad way. It is it is suffering because of certain problems that have gradually crept into the language because of certain social and economic factors. Now, before identifying the problems, which are four in number, I will just name them for you. One is that uh, he lists these problems under four different uh, terms used in the essay. One is the problem of dying metaphors. Second is the use of false limbs. The third is that we are or people are jargonizing the English language. Instead of simple and clear language, they are resorting to greater and greater use of jargon. And last is the use of unnecessarily complicated and formal expressions and meaningless words. These are the four problems that the writer identifies with the English language, which forms the subject of the politics and the English language. But before we come to this, in the introductory part itself, the writer makes a second important point. The point is that deterioration of language is a sign of deterioration of society, but it is a vicious cycle. It is a vicious cycle. By a vicious cycle, we mean that deterioration of language is a sign of deterioration of society, but the deterioration of language further aggravates the problems of the society. So we can say deterioration of language and deterioration of society reinforce one another. They complement one another. They constitute a vicious cycle in which human societies have got trapped. We can put it in a yet more simple terms. We can say that language influences thought and in turn is influenced by the thought. So language influences our thought and thought influences language. So we can put it like this also. Let us come to the four problems identified by the writer in this essay in relation to the debasement, corruption, deterioration, decline in the quality of English language. The problems are: number one, the use of dying metaphors; number two, the use of false limbs; number three, jargon, the excessive use of jargon, technical terminology, and lastly, formal expressions and meaningless words. Now, let's focus on the first term, the first uh, problem, which is the use of dying expressions, dying metaphors. Now, metaphors are like blossoms which make language beautiful, which make language alive with meaning, which renew language and save it from becoming monotonous. We use metaphors from day to night, from morning till evening, as part of our daily life also. Let me give you two very simple examples. It is very normal. We are all speakers of Punjabi and Hindi. I will give you just two examples, one from Punjabi, the other from Hindi. In Punjabi, it is very normal for us to say, "Ke hanera khan nu anda." Now, this is a metaphorical expression. It is an example of figurative speech in which you look at hanera or darkness as a beast, as a predator. But it is so normal that we use it in everyday life. Secondly, once again, in formal speech, in social discourse, it is very normal to say, "Ke ji pragati ki lehar chal rahi hai." Now, when you say pragati ki lehar chal rahi hai, what are you doing? You are looking at Pragati as the wave of a sea. So you are comparing. But to a metaphor is not simply a statement. It comes with a set of connotations. When you are saying कि प्रगति की लहर चल रही है, you are equating the entire process of and progress with C. Now see, the comparison is very apt. ਜਦੋਂ ਤੁਸੀਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਹੋ, when you say ਹਨੇਰਾ ਖਾਣ ਨੂੰ ਆਂਦਾ ਹੈ, once again, Hanera is something which frightens you. So it is something frightening, and it is very appropriate to compare something which is frightening with a predator, with an animal, with a beast. Now, secondly, this is my introduction to metaphors. As far as Orwell is concerned, he draws a distinction between dying metaphors and dead metaphors. Dead metaphors, according to Orwell, are no problem because they do not reduce the vividness of language. They do not reduce the beauty of language. Why so? Because they have become very normal. No one even notices that it is a metaphor. Let me give you one more example. ਜਦੋਂ भी बारिश आंदी है, ਅਸੀਂ ਕਹਿੰਦੇ ਹਾਂ ਬੱਦਲ ਗਰਜ ਰਿਹਾ ਹੈ. Now, this is an example of a dead metaphor. Dead metaphor because we don't even notice that it is a metaphor, that we are looking at clouds in terms of an animal called lion. So हम इस बारे में ध्यान ही नहीं देते. ये dead metaphor की निशानी है. Dead metaphor is a metaphor which has become so common and which has become so much a part of our normal speech that we do not notice that it is a figure of speech, that it is an expression of figurative language, that it is a metaphor. The problem is with dying metaphors. Dying metaphors is a second category of metaphors. And how do we explain dying metaphors? Dying metaphors are metaphors which are overused, which are badly overused, beaten expressions. So, when I said कि जो metaphors हैं, they increase, they enhance the beauty, the evocativeness, and the eloquence of language. ना कई बार हम गानों में कितने ज़्यादा वो metaphors use होते हैं ना, फूलों के शहर में हो घर अपना, इस तरह के एक्सप्रेशन. तो वो जिंदगी जो हमारी जिंदगी की ब्यूटी है वो इसमें समा के, मेटाफर में समा के हम लैंग्वेज को ब्यूटीफुल बनाने की कोशिश करते हैं. तो कमिंग बैक टू माय पॉइंट, लैंग्वेज एनहांसेस द एलोक्वेंस, द इवोकेटिवनेस ऑफ लैंग्वेज. दे मेक लैंग्वेज मोर अपीलिंग. बट dying metaphors do the opposite. He gives so many examples of dying metaphors. I will just read a few, although all of you must have read the essay. I will read a few just for reference sake. One is, bring the changes in, take up the cudgels for, toe the line, ride roughshod. He says that these originally were very good metaphors. They were very evocative. They had lots of eloquence. They had a lot of appeal. But now they are overused to an extent that they have made language banal, monotonous, and stale. So this is the first problem that he identifies in the related to the deterioration of English language. Let me give you one example to make things clear. There is a metaphor where we say we are sailing in the same boat. Now this is, we can say, from our normal life, I have seen at least that this can be placed in the category of dying metaphors, because this is also an expression which has been brought into common use and which is subjected to a lot of abuse and misuse. So let me give you an example. Let's say there are two people and they meet in a shop, and both of them have come there to buy wristwatches. And when they meet each other, they say, oh, one of them says, we are sailing in the same boat. Now, I find this kind of views laughable because it does not it does not cohere with the context. You are buying wristwatches and you are saying we are sailing in the same boat. Now, sailing in the same boat to be used meaningfully must cohere with the larger context. If two people are, let's say, experiencing the same kind of circumstances and passing through the same experiences, they can justifiably say, we are sailing in the same boat. But two people, so this is the kind of buying wristwatches saying we are sailing in the same boat is an inappropriate use. So I hope I have made dying metaphors clear to you. Second second problem identified by George Orwell is the problem of, I will not use the first word, second term is very important, false limbs. Okay, I forgot. Let me give you one more example of a dead metaphor. Then I will come to this. Lame excuse. Lame excuse is a dead. When I say it is a lame excuse, it is originally a metaphor. But when we use such terms, we are never conscious of the fact that this is a metaphor. This is a dead metaphor. So you must learn to perceive, discern the difference between dead and dying metaphors. Orwell's problem is not dead metaphors, dying metaphors. Dying. Then, second problem is the problem of false limbs. What are these false limbs? Let me quote Orwell. Orwell says that they save the trouble of picking out appropriate verbs and nouns and at the same time pad each sentence with extra syllables and give it an appearance of symmetry. Now, very good definition of what has been called operators and false limbs. False limbs, if we put it simply, are ready-made expressions which we tend to use because we have acquired these either from society, social discourses, or from political discourses, from books. And we become habitual to using these expressions. Orwell says that dead false limbs, artificial legs, save us the trouble of searching for the right. They save us mental work. They save us, save us from the trouble of thinking. Because this is a very important attribute of good and effective use of language, to be able to select your words appropriately so that your message is communicated very clearly and unambiguously. So false limbs, according to him, are some ready-made phrases, ready-made expressions. Let me give you an example. First, I will read 3 or 4 examples from Orwell. He's, by way of exemplification, he says, render inoperative, militate against, prove unacceptable, make contact with. These are the examples cited by Orwell in the essay. Let us take some examples from around us. If we have to say that someone is blackmailing the other, or let us imagine a name, let's say Mr. Smith is constantly blackmailing his clients. The same thing, if I use false limbs, can be put as Mr. Smith is resorting to constant blackmail of his clients. See the difference. This is using false. Let me give you one more example. Slums show the level of existing poverty. If I say this with the use of false limbs, I can say that the slums are indicative of the existing levels of. You see the difference between the second sentence looks more formal. it makes me look more educated. So that is the this is a very this is a very brilliant observation of Orwell, where he uh, he notices and brings before us uh, a very important subtlety. This is what we are doing. Language has become ugly. A third example. Language has become ugly. Same thing can be said with the use of false names. If we say language is characterized by ugliness, we are saying the same thing, but we are unnecessarily making the expression look formal. His speech is clear. If we say the same thing with the use of false limbs, artificial legs, we can say his speech is characterized by ugliness. So instead of using, this is actually one of the that one of the larger issues in the essay, that rather than straightforward and forthright prose, which is a very effective way of communicating with our fellow human beings, people have developed the habit, have developed these new habits of unnecessarily making their message ambiguous through a very complicated use of language. This is the whole subject of, and this is symptomatic of some larger problems. The problem that people have stopped thinking freely, people have stopped, circumstances, socio-political circumstances are such is the structure and organization of our society, whether it is the control of political powers, or it is the control of economic powers, or it is the new modes of surveillance that keep monitoring the ways of life, uh, so that the so that the uh, lifestyle, the choices, priorities of people are are available to be exploited. Whatever it is, Orwell is trying to say that people have stopped thinking freely. This is a symptom of larger problems. There is uh, the new culture which has been brought into existence by modernity is a culture which promotes homogeneity at a level where human beings have forgotten dissent. They have forgotten the culture of uh, resistance. They have forgotten the the very important attribute of very clearly critiquing and raising their voice against the problems of the society. So this homogeneity is easily translated into what we can call social conformity, social political conformity. So this is the larger issue. Coming back to the essay. The third problem, which is identified by Orwell, is the problem of pretentious diction. Pretentious diction is the use of unnecessarily uh, hard words in place of simple words. So I will once again read a few lines from the essay. Words like phenomena, element, individual, objective, categorical, effective, virtual, basic, primary, promote, constitute, exhibit, etc. are used to dress up simple statements and give an air of scientific impartiality and biased judgment. He says these there is the next problem is the problem of pretentious diction. The problem of pretentious diction is linked with the fact that we love to use bookish language. We love to use formal expressions, even though they may not mean something. By this, by taking recourse to this habit, we appear to be very impressive, but the problem is that being impressive and being true, being truthful are two different things. So this is a dishonest practice which which smacks of dishonesty, because here the choice of words is not dictated by your need, it is dictated by the need to sound very impressive. So he adjectives like epoch making, epic, historic, unforgettable, triumphant, etc., are used. Now, let me give you another example of this kind of a use of language. Now, if I say he went very low in his behavior, it's a very simple way of of denouncing someone. He went very low in his behavior. The same thing I can say by using a more formal word like descend. I can say he descended very low in his behavior. So by choosing to use the word descend instead of went low, I am maybe trying to impress people with my knowledge of the language by using difficult instead of simple words. We are running out of time, so I will briefly, we can dwell on these in another lecture in more detail, but since I want to finish these four issues which find a mention in this essay, the last one is meaningless words. In certain kinds of writing, I am quoting, particularly in art criticism and literary criticism, it is normal to come across long passages which are almost completely lacking in meaning. Words like romantic, plastic, values, human, dead, sentimental, natural, vitality, etc. are used in art criticism. Now he says that by this, to be brief, meaningless words, he says, are being used in many registers of language. By register, I mean some very specific fields in which English language is used, and the language which is characteristic of those fields is has evidence of this problem. The problem is the use of meaningless. These words do not possess objectivity. They are very subjective. They may not apply very clearly to the field of experience in which they are being used. So it says in art criticism, some very abstract terms like plastic, like vitality are very commonly being used. But no one knows what is the meaning of plastic when you use this term in connection with art. So, dear students, this was my brief introduction to the first part of politics and the English language. Uh, we will discuss the rest of the essay in the second part of our discussion. You may please ask any questions that you may have.